This conference will now be recorded.
So we are being recorded. And good morning. My name is Amy Julian. I'm the director for the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University. And today we're going to talk a little bit about professional communication and what that means and what that looks like. And primarily we're focusing on electronic this week, and then we'll talk a little bit more about interpersonal next week. So with that, couple ground rules as we get started. All of you, actually, you can mute yourself. So you are currently muted, or if you need, you can unmute, but you control that part. And then please introduce yourself by typing your name in the chat box. But I think I can see everybody there. If I can't see you, if you're on your phone, please do chat, put it in the chat box that you're on if you can. And then please use the chat box to ask questions, or if you have comments, we'd love to have you engage. This is a conversation, not just me talking the whole time. And again, couple things just for you at the bottom, or maybe it's on the side of your screen. You have your microphone, you have your camera, which you're welcome to share your camera, and then you have your screen share, which I'm sharing my screen at the moment, and then you have that phone hang up looking thing, and that's how you leave the meeting. The other options you have are in your settings, which is that little gear over there. You have both your computer settings and your phone settings, and everyone has an individual pin for them to come in so they can see who they are. And good morning, Patrick. Thank you for using that chat box and saying that you're on this morning. So our agenda for today, we're going to look at email etiquette. We're going to look at some tips for effective email communication. We're going to look at empathy and productivity, and that's a fine partnership that we do want to tread. And we've talked a lot about that if you've listened to our Thriving the Virtual Workplace series. And really, if you've read Forbes or Business or Google, there's a lot of talk about being empathetic and productive at the same time. So with that, we're going to dive right in this morning. And I'm going to go through just some email etiquette rules, and then we can kind of ask and have conversations here. But the 15 email etiquette rules, which is extensive, but at the same time, I think it's good to have quite a few there. Number one, we want you to include a clear and direct subject line, and these are just good tips. Now, these I've taken from a multiple sources, and you'll see the sources down on the side. Examples of a good subject line include meeting date change, quick question about your presentation, suggestions for the proposal, but be clear and direct in the subject line. One of the other things with number two there is that we want you to be, or this research says it's good to be polite. If you work in a company that uses company email, you want to be sure that you're being polite, using greetings, things of that nature. But in this age of COVID, and we'll talk a little bit about this more as we move through this presentation, that idea of I hope you're well, even capital facts, if you all see that document, that comes out and it says, I'm okay, I hope you're okay, but many Americans are not okay, or many in our state are not okay. But just that idea of taking a second to say, we're all in this together. So let's be polite in our communication. Another big etiquette thing is think twice before hitting reply all. For a couple reasons. For one, no one wants to read 20 emails that have nothing to do with them. So if it has to do with everybody on the thread, that's important. If it doesn't, maybe we need to think twice about hitting reply all. With many people getting notifications of new messages on their smartphones, and having those distracting pop-ups when it's a big thread can be distracting for people. And again, if you have some leadership on there, there's a chance that you might be seen as more annoying than what you're meaning to do, which is kind of being comprehensive and including everybody. So think twice before hitting reply all on those emails. And again, especially if it's something coming out like right now, what we were just discussing was that ISU has our policy for Redbird return. So as I'm looking at that and I'm getting those emails, I'm thinking to myself, I don't want to hit reply all on that, because if I do, that goes to every other person who supervises a team or is a department chair or is a head across ISU. So that's important. Just think twice about replying all. And then include a signature block on all emails. And this does a couple things. It provides your reader with some information about you, and then it's generally good to just have your first name, your last name, title, company name, and maybe just your phone number. And that's one of the things that has really happened in the age of moving to more electronic communication, we've moved away from, well, pre-COVID, we'd really moved away from picking up the phone. And one of the things that's important within your signature block is having that opportunity for people to pick up the phone and get in touch with you. That might be different during this COVID time, but a lot of us, for example, if you call my desk phone, it will within 30 seconds put something to my email. So I know you called, I will have missed the call because I'm not at my desk, but I will have that information. So including that in there. I will also say be very, oh.
Yeah, Amy, is
Yeah.
that a function of your phone system? If ours does that, I don't know that I've ever been known that it would email us to tell us we have a message.
It's a function of the VoIP system, and I know a couple other agencies that it's able to do that with. There are also functions under COVID that some people have it ringing to their cell phone. I don't have that, but I know there's quite a few that if you call someone's desk phone, it just rings to their cell phone. And I spoke with somebody at
Yeah, we have
ITES
a
that did
forwarding
that.
function and probably should have used that, but I may have or may not remember. But I wasn't aware of that email ability. People might be interested in knowing how that works if we have the ability to do it.
I would check with your IT because that's who sets it up for us, but it's an automatic function when people come on or are onboarded is they get that option. And most of us, everyone on my team has it because there's no reason why we wouldn't want to have that. So yeah, I'd check with IT because if you have the
I
VoIP
normally
system, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was there. I normally get so few calls anyway in the office. I tend to forget to look at my phone to see if I have a message, and next thing I know, I'm looking down, and then 4 hours ago, somebody tried to call me and left a message. Or sometimes even the next day, it seems like that I finally look and realize I have a message. So
Well,
that would be good to have, so I would immediately know that there's something there.
exactly, because a lot of us, especially if you're in a cube environment, you have your phone turned down. For the COVID environment, it's important because we're not at our desk. But also pre-COVID, there were quite a few of us who traveled a lot. We were all over, and there was not there would be weeks on end that I was not at my desk or checking into my office. I was working, I was at meetings, I was all over the state of Illinois, and so that function really works well for being able to be present and address everyone's needs, but not necessarily walking in every night and checking my voicemail at the office. So I would look into that. I would assume you would have it because if you have the call forwarding option, you should have the email, and it just sends a little email with the whole voice recording on it. And sometimes it's transcribed. Most of the time, it's not. The other thing I wanted to say with the signature block, it's really important to include it. But also right now in the COVID era, if you don't have a work cell phone, be very cautious of putting your personal cell phone on there. So I'm saying to include a signature block, but at the same time, I still have on my signature, if you've gotten emails from me, which I know quite a few of you have as I'm looking at who's in attendance. I have a little bit of reverb, so if somebody can mute, thank you. Anyway, if you do have a personal cell phone, I would say not put that on there because that information then does become public, especially since we're all public employees. The last point there, use professional salutations. It really depends on understanding your email and who you're emailing. But the idea of saying, hi folks, hi guys, yo, that relaxed nature in our writing should not affect the salutation of the email. Hey is very informal salutation and generally should not be used in the workplace. And yo is not a good way to start an email. So good morning, hello, hi, all fantastic. Use hi or hello instead. And then if you're addressing a person, especially if you haven't talked to them before, say their name. Or if you're sending out emails that, working with individuals, I often say, hi Mark, hi Patrick, hi Jennifer, hi Christy, and then go back to that idea of being polite. How's everybody doing? Things of that nature. Any questions on these first 5 that we're talking about? Anybody think they're just wacky? Okay, we're going to move on then. And so The next 5, again, we're going to chunk those out, is in use explanation points and all caps sparingly. This is really looking at if you choose to use explanation points, you're conveying excitement. So congratulations, especially right now when we're really not able to have those office celebrations, that's fantastic. But using them on all the time, it just seems like you're yelling at somebody. People sometimes get carried away and put a number of exclamation points at the end of their sentences. This results it appear to be emotional instead of actually excited. So be sure that we use explanation points sparingly. Also use all caps sparingly. Obviously, we work in the state, so we have tons of acronyms, right? I can't think of an email that I've sent recently that doesn't have at least one acronym in it. But use the all caps like to say something sparingly, because that conveys to the individual that you are yelling, or you are kind of, that gives that aggressive tone. And we want to be sure that we're aware of our tone, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more in detail later. But those two are pretty kind of clear. The next one is really be cautious with humor. There are some researchers out there that say don't use humor at all. They said don't. Sarcasm does not translate into email or text. Do not use humor. But there's a lot of things that you need to consider. A lot of that research was pre-COVID. And now that the only way that a lot of us are talking are through email is, you have to use humor now and then. Humor can easily get lost in translation though, and without the right tone or facial expression in a professional exchange, it is better to leave humor out of the email unless you know the recipient well. Also, some things you might think that it's not funny. Some people might not think that what you think is funny is funny. So keeping those things kind of moving in that direction of professional. Now, again, many of you work together, and there are individuals who I work with and who I have, and Mark's probably sitting there going, I think you've put hey in an email once, Amy, and you're right, I probably did. But Mark and I have worked together on a regular basis and probably talked 2 or 3 times a day. And those individuals, if you know them in that more everyday setting, it's okay. But I would say if you're talking, and humor's okay, but I would say be cautious with your humor, again, to be sure that the individual who you're emailing, are on the same page. And then with the yos and the heys and the hi y'alls, things like that, I think we would want to kind of rein those back in for professional communication. Any questions there? All right. Number 8 is know that people from different cultures speak and write differently, and communication can easily occur because of a cultural difference, or a miscommunication can easily occur because of a cultural difference, especially in writing forms that we can't see each other's body language. And if we think about the American public and we think about just humans in general, 80% of our message is sent via body language, via some other form than what your mouth is saying, or some other form than what you're talking. So when we are moved to this COVID realm and we don't have those videos on, you really lose about 80% of your ability to communicate your plan. So you have to be sure, as I said last week, we need to over communicate, but at the same times, we want to be sure that we're not offending. There's a whole lot of research around micro messaging, and the idea of what you say, the intent of what you say, and the impact of what you say can be different. And we need to be sure that when we are intending to say something, have you ever said something and then somebody takes it completely wrong? And and I found myself saying this, well, I didn't intend that. That wasn't my intentional message, but it came across that way. One of the things that's important, especially in professional conduct and professional communication, is that impact is actually a little bit more important than that intent, because if we offend somebody, that does have, just damaging relationship issues. So we want to be sure that we're aware of those cultural barriers, we're aware of those cultural differences, we're aware of the culture and the background, as well as we can know a person who we're talking with. A good rule to keep in mind is that high context cultures, the Japanese, the Arab, the Chinese, they want to get to know you before doing business with you. And so thinking about how we can embrace those in things, and again, going back to that idea of being personal, showing interest, being polite. And they're going to be more personal in their writings as well to you. So embrace that. Some of us are like, oh, get to the point. There's 3 email styles that we'll talk about, which is that idea of get to the point, somebody who's kind of interested in the socialization, and then the individual who takes a long time to get to the point and really wants to know all the things that are going on in your life. And so look at those differently that way. On the other hand, though, people, and this is where we get into that second kind, those individuals who are from the German culture, the American culture, and the Scandinavian cultures very much prefer very quick, pointed conversations, direct communication. So kind of know your audience is really important, but also know that people do communicate differently. Okay, last thing there, reply to your emails. Even if the email wasn't intended for you, it's important to reply to your emails. So when we talked last week about time blocking, one of those things that should be on your time block is designated time to be responsive to emails. So let's look at, and I'll take, an example of, you have this project you're working on, you have a report due for this. You need to get this agenda put together for the meetings that are coming up. You need to get the meeting notes done from this particular event that you just went to, or this agenda that we just had, or a meeting that we just had. But throughout your day, you need to look at time to reply to emails. And even if that email wasn't intended for you, it is important to let them know that, hey, I might have got that in error. Because sometimes people send an email and they don't follow all my rules here, and they don't necessarily look at who they're sending it to. And if it gets to the wrong person, we want to be sure that they're aware of that. And it's difficult to reply to every message that's ever sent to you, but try to. The emails that are accidentally sent to you, especially if the sender is expecting a reply and the reply isn't necessary, important to your work, but is important to someone's work, we want to be sure that they know, I know you're busy, but this wasn't intended for me, or are you sure this was intended for me? So that's just a fun focus of reply to your emails, and build that into your time blocking. So at the end of every day, or as you close out your day and you're making your to-do list, kind of go through at least the emails of the day. Proofread every message. This kind of goes without saying, and goes back to all of our school days of, be sure you proofread your work and reread your work. But your mistakes will not go unnoticed if you don't proofread your message. And depending on the recipient, they may judge you for making that mistake. So we have spell check, right? Everybody has spell check. We should be able to send out messages that don't need proofreaded, but a lot of the research says don't rely on the spell checkers. Reread your email a couple times or a few times, preferably aloud, before sending them off. And again, these aren't the, hey, I'll be there in 15 minutes, or yes, I'm coming, or those shorter emails, but the bigger emails, you need to be sure you proofread, or anything that's going out to more than one person. Think about it as you voice text. Is anybody guilty of voice texting? I am. And I will tell you that I've even I voice text in the car sometimes to my family, hey, I'm doing this. And then if I don't read it, it comes across weird. And what happens is that as I have found that as I've gotten older, I need glasses to read. So I've had to just lay off voice texting altogether, because I don't need them to drive, but I need them to read. And yeah, that's usually when I'm doing the voice texting. Don't judge. Anyway, so one supervisor intends to write, sorry for the inconvenience, but he misspells and he says, sorry for the incontinence. That's an issue. Spell check's not going to pick that up. So be sure we're proofreading our messages, so our intent is what we're intending to say. Everybody good there? Any questions with these? Usually explanation points, being cautious with humor, understanding people's from different cultures, replying to your emails, and then proofreading. All right, we are not quite talkative, but you can put those chats in the chat box there. And I'm going to show you the last 5 now. So we got a nice little ping on that one. These last 5 kind of dive in a little bit deeper, but it's really important to look at. So add the email address last. And what that means, or what they're trying to say there, is really, if you're composing an email, you don't want to accidentally send that email prior to it you finishing it. So add that email address last. Compose your email, put it all together, reread it, proofread it, make sure you're in good shape, and then add that email address. So that way you don't accidentally hit send, or something doesn't happen that it goes off too quickly. Again, a lot of times we are replying, so that's not necessarily the case there, but when we can, let's be intentional with that. Double check that you've selected the correct recipient. Always important. There are, I believe, somewhere around 3,000 Jennifers in our system, right? And there is, and in my world alone, there's tons and tons of ways to, different Jennifers that I talk to. So be sure that I'm getting to the right Jennifer. There are, at ISU, for example, there are now 2 Amy Julians. One is a graduate student and one is me. And I've gotten emails for her, and apparently she got an email for me and she had no clue what it was about. But double check that you're sending to the correct information and to the correct recipient. Keep your fonts classic. A lot of you work in agencies, actually you guys all work in, don't you have a template and a font and those parameters set up for you? Because I know a lot of state agencies do that. They have their select fonts that they're supposed to use. They have their select when you can italicize, kind of those guiding rules for marketing. Purple Cosmic Sans, not a great idea if you do have that flexibility in your schedule or in your allowable fonts. And generally it's just best to use 10 or 12 point font. One of the things you want to keep in mind is your audience. Excuse me. And the age of your audience and the age of your audience's eyes, because sometimes a lot of the serif fonts people can't see when they're clustered together. For example, there's a restaurant here in town that I absolutely love, the Still Brew House. It's fantastic. But the font that they use on their menu, I have to put my glasses on to read. And it's just, something that you need to think about for your emails, and just use those classic fonts. Keep tabs on your tone and show respect and restraint. So we're going to talk a little bit about sending angry emails and how we should not send angry emails, but also keeping tabs on your tone goes back to that idea of the humor doesn't translate. So a just joke would get lost in translation. Tones are easily misconstrued without context, and especially right now, when we are in this COVID era where everyone is not in the office with you. So it's not like, oh, we all saw that and now, we're responding to it. You have, let me pick on some names here. You have Susan at home and she's got this going on. And then you have Patrick at his house and he has all this, different stresses going on. And Mark's over here dealing with this stuff. And your tone that you might mean to be funny in their personal situation, what's going on in their life, because we're not all in the same space together, we're not aware of. So keep tabs on your tone, but also show respect and restraint. So be sure that we're always respectful. Again, professional communications, because back to this last one, nothing is confidential, so write accordingly. Anything that you put in writing in an email, especially as public employees, can be FOIA'd. So be sure that we are keeping tabs on our tone and being respectful and showing restraint and all of those good things. And yes, a couple comments in the chat. The personal cell phone issue, Patrick, you said you learned that the hard way. I have learned that the hard way as well. I had an individual from a public school who would text me throughout the, excuse me, night and weekends about different things that he was supposed to be delivering to me. And I was like, no, this is my personal cell phone. So be careful on who you hand that out to. And I know that's a little bit more challenging right now. If you notice, I think it's State Board has put on their email is the best way to contact me. We are not in the office. Like that's their tagline at the end of every email. And maybe that's some way to do that. Retracting emails is tricky because it depends on the system. So if you're talking about or trying to retract an email, those of you who are familiar with Gmail know that they have that like 10-second delay. So your email says it's sent, and then you have 10 seconds kind of that, oh my gosh button, and you can kill it before it goes. Microsoft Outlook does not have that. So they do have the retracting function, but if someone has seen that and opened it, then someone has seen that and opened it. So that's really important that you're careful in that retracting. Now, again, spelling error, sometimes we're going a little fast, but take those times, take that breath and say, okay, is this what I want to say? And there's always a lot of angst about meeting deadlines. And I know we all live in that world of, okay, this has to be done right now, but 30 seconds to take a breath and reread it and make sure that you've sent the right thing or said the right thing is a much better use of time than the 3 hours that you're going to have to do to pull back something that you did incorrectly. And just kind of think of it that way. It's worth it to take a second and double check. Are we good with the email etiquette rules? Oh, another question is tactfully way to ask others not to reply all. BCC. If I'm not a fan of the BCC under OMA, we are definitely using BCC because that is a way that people can't reply all. But if you want to avoid that everyone's replying all and you only want to have people come back to you, if you BCC and they hit reply all, it just comes back to you. Or that's how our system is set up. So that's my best way to tactfully ask others not to reply all. Or you can simply say in there, hey, let's not reply all. If you have any questions, send them to me. And I know we've had to do that, and Mark can speak to this a little bit with the OMA stuff. And when we're sending out stuff for IWIB meetings, we BCC, and then we also say any questions, additions sent to this particular person. Did that answer that question? I'm going to take silence as a yes, so we're going to move forward. Tips for effective email communication. So we have the tips for etiquette. We're good, right? We're feeling that we know how to be kind and nice and professional through email. But what are some tips for effective email communication? And these are really, and I didn't go into the nothing is confidential, but that kind of goes without saying, just anything in writing. That was a thing my grandmother always told me growing up. So practice being clear and concise in your message. And as I said, there's three different kinds of email individuals. There are those who want the short and sweet. There are those who want the pleasantries but still want you to get to the point. And then there's those who want your whole life story. And most of us, I'm going to assume, because I've worked with quite a few of you, don't necessarily want your whole life story right now. We've got a lot of work to get done. So practice being clear and concise. We're going to talk about what a good template is for an email. The second one there, before sending, always reread your message. I cannot stress this enough. And I kind of cringe when I see emails that come through and it's like, oh, that's not what you meant to say. Before sending, always reread your message and double check for grammatic errors and misused words. It's obvious to most of us that spell check that we've composed our email, right? And we know it's good, it's there. Also, sometimes depending on your systems, especially if you're on home, which we're all on home right now, if your system's a little lagging, your spell check might not be automatic as it was in the office. So take that extra 30 seconds, read it, make sure it says what you're supposed to say, or what you intend to say, not what you're supposed to say, but what you're intending to say. Because that can kind of be a deal breaker there for individuals. Oftentimes you'll notice words which have been left out, grammar that is incorrect, or worst of all, a word which is spelled correctly but not used in the right way. So you want to be sure you do all of those things just reading over. And again, it doesn't take that long, but nothing is that, again, the time to retract it and fix it, once the damage is done, easier to just take that 30 seconds. Copy back salient points when replying to an earlier email. So have you ever gotten an email, like you're going through your day and you get an email that says, yeah, sure, or sure, sounds fine, please proceed. Yet they deleted the whole other conversation, so you're not really sure what exactly they are replying to? That can get us in trouble, right? Sometimes we're like, yes, excellent. And other times we're like, wait a second, what was this replying for? So a good rule of thumb is to either reply to the thread, including the thread, but depending on your device. Now I know you can set up Outlook that it doesn't do that. It just cuts off the message. And if you're on an iPad replying, sometimes it does that. Or if you're on your phone, when we were all traveling, I know my phone did that when we did one of the updates with Apple. So copy back the salient points. So please proceed and say, with whatever it is, or the color scheme, or whatever we're working on. But being sure that we're copying back those salient points, so then we are all on the same page as we move forward. Apparently I felt this was very important because I said being clear and concise twice. And that's, again, very, very important. We're going to skip to that next one, though. Realize that once your message is sent, it is difficult to recall. And Patrick, we kind of just talked about this a little bit. Although there are some limits, technology that exists for recalling messages, it's not universal. And possibly what the research says is it is possible to ruin your career with a 60-second time lapse in judgment. So you want to take that time and reread. And also depending on who you're emailing, because we don't email just people at illinois.gov or ilstu.edu, we email people out in the system who have Gmails and Yahoos, and I think I've seen an AOL come, and I thought those all died in the 90s. But the point is that we don't know what systems they have, and sometimes when we try to retract, it's challenging for us to retract. So it's better to, again, be clear and concise and review before sending. This next one's really important. Practice that 24-hour rule when you're upset. It's never a good idea to send an email when you're angry. We've all been guilty of this. In the heat of the moment, you type up a literally bomb blast, a message that will reduce that recipient to mush. When we even reread it, we're actually sort of proud of how powerful the wording is. We imagine the recipient opening it, cringing as he or she reads those words, and then we send it. Not a great idea. Only later, after we calm down, we revisit the message, we realize how that we dramatically overreacted. And it's too late. So the only thing that we can do at that point is apologize or stand our ground and say that we were really upset, but then there's no good that comes to either one of those things. So practice that 24-hour rule. We're going to talk about that again later because that's a big one that came across all the research. Double check and practice the 24-hour rule. If it is something that needs sent out right away, have a critical friend read it over for you. Have someone come. It was easier when we were in the office together. More than one occasion did I say, hey, Casey, come here, I need you to read this over. Is this saying what I want to say? Or, hey, how does this sound? But now it doesn't hurt to have, send it to that person and say, can you look this over for me? I want to make sure I'm not coming across too brash, too rash, or too critical. A critical friend is good. So it's kind of one of those, the business world uses the term carefrontations. I care about you, so I'm going to confront you about this. But we have to have that kind of empathy that, again, the governor continues to speak about, that empathy idea. Everybody good there? Okay. Avoid shortcuts and abbreviations in business email messages. This kind of goes without saying, and it also depends on your age, but we are also going to look at an influx of millennials joining us in the workplace. So if you're a millennial on the call, welcome, fantastic. But we need to not be using those text abbreviations. One of the things that if you're old like I am, you remember when we had, we texted through numbers. And so like all these different numbers to spell words. Those things haven't really translated on, but we need to be sure. But if you've looked at a teenager, I have a 13-year-old, it's basically CIA code to decode what they're talking about because they talk in these little shortcuts and abbreviations. That's lovely for 13-year-olds, probably even 16-year-olds, but in the business world, we don't want to use that. We have enough acronyms that people can't understand, especially when we're crossing with partners because our acronyms we're working very hard to get those aligned, but sometimes they don't align. We want to be sure that we're not using shortcuts and abbreviations. And that's something that I run into at ISU all the time. I use CTE, which is in my world, career and technical education. But in ISU world is career teaching excellence. And there's a center and a thing for that. So this last one, I know you're all thinking, yes, I don't do that. So, but we have. Don't forward those viral messages. And again, I'm not trying to be critical, but I know, and this is what the research says, that everyone will say, you know what, I'm only forwarding important messages onto my coworkers and friends, and that's all I'm doing. However, not so fast. Many of us are guilty about forwarding things about pending congressional tax emails, avoiding wake-up calls in a hot bathtub of ice, something with Bill Gates, or there's been individuals, and a lot of things happen lately with companies being hacked. So one of the Chamber of Commerce that I work with, their email was an individual there, her email was hacked, and it sent out this virus document to everyone in her email. address book. And then when somebody wrote back to the system and said, hey, is this a valid email? Should I open this document? The system actually, because it wasn't aware of the virus, responded, yes, that is a valid email. The question was it a valid email? Yes. The document did have a virus. It's been a whole big crazy thing for them. And we don't want to be forwarding those viral messages. But again, also be aware as a user, when you're opening those messages, what those things look like. Because, for example, when I got this from her, I was like, Aberlin doesn't usually send me attachments, but the email's correct. But there was no, there was just some weird telling things. And I was like, delete. I'll just follow up with an email with her separate and say, hey, if you sent me something, I didn't open it, so let me know what it is that you're sending me. And that's much better than, especially in this day and age, spending a couple weeks without a computer because you have a virus. Any questions about those tips for effective communication? Be clear, be concise, reread, be sure we know what the point is that we're trying to make so we don't delete it all off. And practice that 24-hour rule. Everybody feeling good? Yes, we're feeling awesome. Okay, great. So here's a sample exercise, and this is just, I found these fun. So this is sample 1, and the subject line is tomorrow. And then I'll let you guys read that there. I'll give you a second to read that. And this was taken from UNC teaching college students how to write emails, but I thought it was a fun little exercise. All right, everybody read it? Anybody need more seconds? All right, I'm going to show you the next one. So this is a sample email. And again, you're all able to unmute yourselves and participate, so please do. And this same information, a little bit different. Give you a second to read this. You're able to read a little bit faster, aren't you? So let's kind of have a little, and we can do it in the chat, or please feel free to unmute yourself. Which version do you think is most effective? Anyone want to participate and tell me? I'll call on people. Oh, we have somebody in the chat. The second one because of the dot points. Thank you, Susan. The second one, Laura says the second one as well. Excellent. So we do feel, and this is something that we want to be thinking about as we're putting together emails, again, when everything that we're doing today is communications of emails. This first one, as you know, tomorrow the meeting will be discussed, and we've got misspelled words. Anybody ever do the T-E-H? Yeah, that was intentional this time. I didn't do it on. So thinking about that, bring copies. It doesn't really say what to bring. It does say there's going to be donuts. That's important. And then also want to remind us, fun things that are due later this week, but you don't know when the meeting is. You don't know what time the meeting is. You don't know where the meeting is. So that's really important to think about. Does your email include everything or all the information that the recipient needs to move forward? Second email. Wednesday staff meeting. So I know where I'm going, right? We have a Wednesday staff meeting. It's at 3 p.m. It's in the conference room. You need to bring 15 copies. Not enough for everybody. You might not know how many people are going to be at that meeting. Bring 15 copies. You need to bring your project calendar. You need to bring a one-page report describing your progress so far, the list of the goals that you have for the next month, and a copy of any progress report messages you have sent to clients in the past month. And then you actually even signed it, Jane. So it's not just a bunch of words all coupled together that people are a lot of times think about you personally, and then think about individuals who you email. If you email that first email, people are going to kind of skip over it, or especially if they're just looking on the fly, like, not that we're ever guilty of this, but maybe right now you're checking email in addition to listening to me, you're going to skip over sample A. or the sample 1, but you're going to get all the information you need from sample 2. So think about that in composing emails as well. What are some good email things? So these are our takeaway tips, and we're going to wrap up here in the next 15 minutes. So takeaway tip number 1. The missing element in this email is rapport. So keep in mind, this is just an example that I wanted to share up here. Let's look at the types of email messages. What is written? Okay, I'll see if I can manage. What is heard? And this often happens, and this is that kind of communication that I want to talk to you about. I've already have tons of work, but because you are obnoxious, you are piling on more. I will do it because I have no choice. What do you think? I am a donkey? And then what could have been written? Instead of, okay, I'll see if I can manage, I will get to it as soon as I can. I'm done with the other stuff. When I'm done with the other stuff on my schedule, it might be some time though. Is this urgent? So again, back to that idea of last week, and we talked about priority management. We want to be sure that when we're asking somebody to do something or when we're responding to something, that we're getting more information or the information that we need. So this was taken, and I stole this exactly from skillsyouneed.com. So if you want to click the link and check that out, you're welcome to. But the idea is that instead of saying, okay, we'll see if I can manage, ask things like, is this urgent? What is the timeline for this? Are we going to need to have this done? Just a little bit more detail to answer those questions instead of that harsh, fine, okay, short response, right? Because again, we want to be sure we're aware of our tone. And everybody has different things that they're stressing with. I mean, today is Friday, Monday we're off. And yes, please take Monday off. It is Memorial Day. You get to take Monday off. Don't take your laptop with you and sit outside and say, oh, I'm working outside today, so that's a holiday. No, take the day off. Take that time. I'm sure there's some manager saying, no, we have stuff to do. But seriously, let your employees take those times, get things done. But at the same time, be sure that we're managing that time and using the time as we need it. And there's a lot to do right now. We're all busy. We're all overwhelmed. And that's the thing that you need to be aware of. You don't know necessarily who on the other end of that email, what their situation is and what they're dealing with. And also, there's a lot of us who are private people. So we're not just sharing out, hey, this happened, but you're still dealing with that stress or what you're worrying about and those things that we talked about last week. So keep that in mind. Another one, takeaway tip number 2, keep it short and sweet. Again, I've said this about 3 or 4 times, can't stress it enough. This is a foolproof formula for an email. 2 lines personal opener. How you doing? How are you? Welcome. You know, hello, my name is Amy Julian. Introduce yourself if you don't know the person. And I didn't stress that, but I kind of thought that was a given. If you don't know who you're emailing or you're emailing for the first time, be sure you always introduce yourself and your purpose. There was when I was a kid, and actually all through graduate school, there was a thing called a GNAP, greeting, name, affiliation, and purpose. And anytime you met someone, you needed to do your GNAP. So what was your greeting? Hello, my name is Amy Julian. I'm with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support, and I'm here today to talk to you about effective communication through email. Every time. And so we teach that to our students. That came out of FFA. I used it all the time. Yep, you're talking to a blue jacket here. And just wanted to, put that out there. 1 paragraph, 4 to 5 lines in the body of the issue. We don't need 6 pages. Be concise. 4 to 5 lines. What is the thing? 2 lines for the next action. So, welcome. Here's the information. 2 lines. What action do you want to have happen? And then 2 lines for closure. And close on a warm note. Thank you so much for your time. Hope you're feeling well. Things like that. Again, stole this. I'm good, but I'm going to give credit where credit is due. So look at that as a formula. Takeaway tip number 3. And what did I call this? The coffee cup rule. If it is a critical email, do not, under any circumstances, send it right away. Write the email, save it as a draft before you send it, especially those middle of the night, half asleep missives. Ask a critical friend to read it or review it for you. So if it's a critical email, have another set of eyes look at it. And even though we're not all together and you can't say, hey, swing over to my cube, and those of you who know me, actually, none of you probably work with me, but in my office, I'm very guilty of saying, hey, come here, instead of, especially in the cube farm. Leave the email in the draft folder and have a cup of coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker, but have a cup of coffee, have a cup of tea before you hit that send button the next morning. You will see the email in a new light after a cup of promise. That makes sense? It is not bad to get, I mean, if there's something that's keeping you up at night, if there's something that you're just like, oh my gosh, I have to deal with this, get up, write the email. I've done that thousands of times. I'm stirring at 2 a.m. I can't get back to sleep because this has to get done, and I feel like I should have said this or didn't say that. That just adds stress, right? That's putting things on you that other person or whoever the situation is probably isn't feeling. So take that power away from them and say, all right, I'm going to put this in writing, and then I'm going to step away. I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to bed. I'm going to, cleanse myself of that situation for the next few hours, come back the next morning. If you keep that hyped anxiety, then when you send it, it kind of snowballs into a bad situation, and we don't want that. So again, takeaway tip number 3, the coffee cup. And I'm not a coffee drinker, so if you're not a coffee drinker, don't be offended by that, whatever thing you want to be partaking in. But the idea of taking a step back and that critical friend, don't send it to somebody who's going to say, yes, this is awesome, you're brilliant all the time. If you have those people in your life, that's awesome, because I don't. But you want to send it to somebody who is going to say, you know what, maybe this tone, are you sure you want to say this? Those people are really important and valuable to review your work. Takeaway tip number 5, the Ohio principle, and this is actually stole from Google. And I don't know if you can see that on the bottom there, the tagline of its communication strategies from Google. The Ohio principle is only handle it once. So my husband can hear me, so I'll be careful what I say, but my husband works in the private sector, and he tells me often that if I have more than 25 emails in my inbox, open or not open, that I'm not managing my inbox properly. How many of you are laughing right now? Because I'm guessing if you look in your email box, there are more than 25 emails in your inbox that are open or not open. Anybody? Am I alone? Okay. So when opening a new email, you need to decide this is a great strategy. Decide immediately what action to take. Email should be divided into 3 categories. I'm going to read it straight away and respond, forward it, or file it. So back to that idea last week of the Eisenhower principle. Review, delegate, is it urgent? Is it on fire? Can it be delegated, or is it just something that I read it and I can be deleted? Read it to the point where you determine it requires an action later and add it to that to-do list. Label it as not worth reading and delete it. That's the Ohio principle. That's what Google really recommends, and the leadership of Google implement this across the board, and I know business uses this a lot. And depending on the day, where is that label of not worth reading. So how many of us get those listserv announcements? I get stuff from Forbes on, how to be an effective leader. I get stuff from the National Alliance for Partnerships and Equity. I get emails regularly from IACT and ACTE and the workforce, all this fun different emails that people are sending out. And often, depending on the day, especially when I'm eating that frog in the morning, I'm talking about just, they're not worthy of reading today. I don't have time for this today. On another day, like maybe on Monday, if I'm sifting through my email, if it's pouring down rain, I might check that out and see what those fun resources are. Jennifer Phillips has put in there that there's another great resource, David Allen's Getting Things Done, and it's a website and book, so go ahead and check that out. That's in the link. In the email there. Patrick, do you have 14,000 emails? Oh. That's a lot of emails, Patrick. We might need to work on your delegating, or look at this Ohio principle. Only handle it once. Straight away, read it to the point where you determine it requires action, and then label it as not worthy. I think this is a really good tip. Takeaway tip number 4, be kind. Do not write anything in an email that you would not say to a person's face. We have found this happening a lot with the virtual world that we have immersed ourselves in really over the last 20 some years, that people are more critical and much more brazen when they are able to say something over email. Check out Facebook, look up anything political on Facebook, and you will find a lot of people giving a lot of opinions. We don't want to be those people during our email. So do not write anything in an email that you would not say to a person to their face. Many people have chosen to use email as an excuse. I kind of already covered that. An ugly, rude email is the worst and most incriminating evidence that you can do and much more damaging than a few harsh words exchanged in a face-to-face. Again, back to that point, everything that we write is recorded. Someone can find it. So take those breaths, take those walks, be sure that we're just being kind in our communication. And our last tip here is that idea of time management. So I've talked about this throughout the day and last week about time management and time blocking. But again, take that time to get through your email box. In the COVID era, this is our one mechanism for constant communication with our clients. This is our one mechanism for constant communication within our system and our colleagues and our managers and our everybody. So be sure that we're blocking some time within our time management strategies to address our emails. Oh, wrong direction. There we go. And then the last little thing there, and I really liked this. It was a discussion taken out of Start with Empathy that was written in April by Gordon Rodu. And empathize and recognize. Ask people how they are doing and take the time to listen. Encourage small sprints. So look at, again, back to that idea of chunking, look at what we need to do and then what do we need to do to accomplish it and set those deadlines accordingly. And encourage people to say, you know what, we're going to have to work really hard on this for this little bit of time and then we're going to move, we're going to give you, you're going to be able to take vacation in July or something like that. Recognize accomplishments. In the era of COVID, this is so very important. We are cranking out a lot of fantastic work and there's a lot of wonderful things being done. Do not lose sight of taking time to recognize, even if it's just in a kind email, even if it's during a staff meeting saying, look at everything we accomplished this week, with the little clapping hands or whatever you want to do, something like that, but recognize accomplishments. As I said, when we talked about the teams, and Todd will be talking to you more about teams all through June, but we have a happy hour, which is what we call it, but it's just an informal conversation with individuals on the team. And I will say it depends on the week if there's stuff posted on there, and sometimes there's nothing posted on there because we're all very busy trying to get our deliverables met. But at the same time, that's a nice place to recognize those accomplishments. Say, hey, way to go on that great newsletter. Hey, good job getting this report out. Wonderful meeting. I really enjoyed it. Things like that. This is a quote that I just really love and I think was really appropriate. And this is from Gordon. Continue to take deep breaths. Seek out good news stories and share them with your colleagues or friends. Take regular breaks to manage your emotions. And where safe, get fresh air and physical exercise. If this isn't possible, adapt to your work environment, such as separating spaces at home for work and downtime. And we've talked a lot about that. That's kind of been our theme. I think that's just a nice summary of some of the things that we've talked about in that how we can make it through this COVID time together. And again, the end is in sight. I know for us, we're going to be back in the office in July, so that's exciting. And other entities will be back at different times and different time frames. So it's interesting to see, do all these things, but our mental health and our physical health are really important because they're what keep us productive. So what questions do we have? I'm going to pop over here to the chat box. Great suggestion there. If you put the bulk email rule in place to go into a folder like Workforce GPS, you can reread those at your leisure, but they aren't prioritized in your inbox. And that's something that's really important. Where do those things need to go? And a lot of that is something that I do with, there's a email thread that I get that's upcoming trainings. And so I will put those in the if they're not something that I can do right away, I put them in this folder. And then you go back in and you're like, okay, are those things that I can tackle? Are those things that I want to attend? Excellent suggestion. And back to the using project email for folders and rules for e-newsletters. And again, you want that information and you might need that information. And if you skim it, if you're a skimmer, I'm a skimmer when it comes to those big newsletter things that come out. There's something that I see that I want that I might want to remember, so just put it in a folder. It also depends on how you use your trash and how long your trash is kept. If we put something in our trash at ISU, every month they delete our trash. The system does automatically. If it's in your trash, it's deleted. They only keep it for 30 days. If it's somewhere else, you can keep it for 7, 25 years. I don't know how many years you can keep it. I have stuff from like 2002. Fantastic. But if you put it in your trash, it's gone every month. So be sure that you're filing what you want to keep and dispensing of what you don't want to keep. And that's just a good rule of thumb across the board with any of your file systems or priority work in your checklist. Any other questions for me? We are exactly at 9:59, so thank you all so very much for a great session. I hope you learned a lot, or at least learned something from the session. Next week, we'll be back with really tackling that inbox and communicating. So how not to have 10,000 emails. Yes, Patrick, I'm looking at you on that one. And how you can find different mechanisms to communicate with your team. So whether that is on Teams, which again, and I'm sure you all are aware, we're going to have a complete series on the Teams platform and other apps that build into Teams and what they can do for you. That starts June, and it's every Friday in June through June. And then next week, we're going to talk about different platforms that we can use aside from Teams. We'll chat a little tiny bit about Teams that can really kind of get some of the conversation work out of your inbox and into other product ways that they can get a hold of you. So thank you also very much for your time. Enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. I really encourage you to take the time, take a walk, have a great day, and thank you very much.